Good afternoon. My name is Bhagowalia, and I'm going to talk about the Federal Cloud Computing Initiative, also known as FCCI. We're looking for some good acronyms by the government. We got to have good acronyms. So FCCI doesn't exactly roll off the tongue there a little bit. So if anyone has any suggestions, glad to take those. We're going to talk about some of the efforts that we at GSA are helping, working with all the agencies and also with the White House and OMB on establishing this thing called cloud. And I've been in industry and government for 25 years, and it's very interesting to see how we've gone through shared services, data centers, virtualization, consolidation, and so on and so forth. And everything comes full circle, and except they're called different things. So I remember the days when I used to be an engineer, and I had those pocket protectors. How many of you remember those pocket protectors? Say it loud and say it proud. You know, have those pocket protectors. And we used to draw the things. Every time in the middle where we didn't know what the heck was going on, we just put a cloud in the middle, right? And we just called it the network or something. And I'm an engineer, by the way, so full disclosure here. And so the cloud was, and little did we know that eventually the cloud was going to be so important. So I'm so glad. I'm sort of tearing up almost right now. And in fact, let me just wipe that off. Yeah, okay, here we go. So cloud was something that we thought about, and then afterwards, what has happened is the confluence of everyone doing their own thing, and you know, their own private infrastructures, and so on and so forth. The question of trust, and so on and so forth, was quite a big challenge. And I think after a while, with all the budget realities, and we all know what the budget realities are, it's very interesting what are all the different forces that have now coalesced around this cloud. So I'll be talking about that. I was formerly the CIO at Interior Department and formerly at Justice Department. I've also been in NASA and Boeing and other places. And so I've seen a lot of these things emerge in terms of infrastructure. And today we'll talk about all these wonderful things in this new world called cloud. All right, it works. And I can do it forward and backwards. That's impressive indeed. So the very first thing is a cloud computing strategy. We all got to have a strategy. So in the middle is the globe. It's like Rosebud, you know. Well, great. Someone got that. That's pretty good. That was a Citizen Kane reference, sorry. But the thing was that we are trying to have this cloud framework for migration from as-is and to-be. This is a typical architecture transition from where we are today. But the main thing is that there's a strategy that the White House has come up with, which is really excellent in terms of government that works. And with that, they've come up with closing the IT performance gap. And I must say all kudos to the federal CIO and CTO for their vision. And the federal CIO has come up with this closing the IT performance gap by leveraging cloud computing services, improving the management of major IT initiatives, and obviously adapting shared services, which is something that has existed before. So with all of this confluence of these things, how do we get there? So NIST, as you know, Don Leaf, is the cloud executive at NIST. And we talked about definition of what is a cloud and their characteristics, there are 5 characteristics on the bottom right. And then there's the cloud deployment models, which is the 4 models, which is hybrid, private, public, and community. And then we have the 3 kinds of services that we look at and service models. And these include infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and software as a service. So all of these things are now reaching some definitions. For each one of these, there's a tangible acquisition and actually a plan that is being executed. And all agencies are forming around what this thing is, and so we're defining it together. I have this famous expression that I saw somewhere, and I really love it. The best way to predict the future is to invent it. So I say this all the time. And the reason I use that is because we don't know what the future is. We are defining this ourselves in terms of what the cloud is. So for example, infrastructure is a very key area, obviously. It's very obvious what we're all wanting to do, and so we have come up with acquisitions, and we're starting the journey on that. Software as a service, a little more sketchy, but we're coming out with email as a service for government that I'll be talking about with an RFP or RFQ. And then the last one is platform as a service, still slightly more nebulous. But the idea is we're trying to come up with things like platform which people can publish to and then use, and geospatial is one of the examples that we'll be talking about. And then there is the select, provision, manage. So for all of this strategy has been published, not this particular graphic, but the overall strategy at CIO.gov. It's called the Cloud Computing Strategy. And in that, there's a select, provision, manage. It's a 3-step model. So this is somewhat akin to the OMB, how we manage an IT portfolio, which is select, control, evaluate, but this is select, provision, and manage. And the idea is select the service you want, provision it, and then manage it. It's a very simple process. And then under that, there's governance and cloud examples, and there are many, many examples. There are 30 business cases or use cases already published by the government. Again, go to CIO.gov. These are published from last year. We've added more, and we have, I think, identified up to 70 to 72 other cases that we're looking at. In that cloud computing strategy and, of course, the IT reform model. How many of you know the IT reform, the 25-point plan? There's a quiz after this, by the way. And in that, the federal CIO, again, great vision, and all of us contributed in a small way to that, is that it says you shall have 3 examples of cloud migration over the next 18 months. So now it's tangible. This policy is actually having something with some teeth. And then you see the how we get there, which is the as is. So efficiency, agility, and innovation are the 3 things that we're looking at. And for each one of these, there are some examples as to some numbers in terms of virtualization and capabilities and so on and so forth. So I'm just saying we're not just talking here. We've actually got some examples, and now we're going to embark on this journey with real tangible acquisitions. And of course, this budget scenario has spurred us on a little bit more. And again, I must also acknowledge the great work done by NIST. Don is sitting in the back right there. And I always acknowledge the fact that they've been working with us not only on the cloud security model, which I'll talk about, called FedRAMP. We're working with a lot of government agencies. It's unprecedented. In all my years, I've seen just tremendous cooperation, and the standards and some of the architecture work that we're all doing is starting to coalesce. It's still a little kind of different places, but we're coalescing. Okay, so what is the value proposition here? The value proposition here is that we spend $80 billion, not counting the intel community and not counting state and locals, in IT, in our budget. Out of a $2.5 trillion overall government budget, $80 billion is spent on IT alone. And in that, roughly $20 billion is spent on infrastructure, and the infrastructure has got many, many opportunities for us to leverage and improve the way we not only provide services. And so the data center consolidation initiative is one example that we're pursuing, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And also the fact that we have a whole example of what we think is a way that we can, through cloud, also realize some of the savings in the $20 billion by moving certain use cases at the low and moderate level of security. So we all know about FISMA, the law of FISMA, right? So it has 612 controls that we put in under that for FISMA that you could implement if you would. And so at the low level, we are somewhere near 112 to 126 that we are agreeing to. The NIST baseline is about 114, I believe. And so that's going to be the low model, if you would. And then there's a moderate model, which has got currently got 251, which is a baseline, and then 51 additional that we're working with DoD, DHS, and others. So again, about 312 out of 6. So as you can see, we're now getting into something specific. But wait, there's more. You don't get a Ginsu knife with this, by the way. What we're also doing is also looking at continuous monitoring. Which of those controls should we really manage? So remember, the idea was previously there was a lot of compliance, and so now we need to get to more continuous monitoring because the threat changes. If you have a perfect security plan that's sitting on a shelf, as with, like I said, in a great paper document, those are like proud words on a dusty shelf, correct? I mean, we have all those things sitting over there, but that doesn't improve your proactive security posture. We need metrics, and we need continuous monitoring regimens so your perimeter and everything is looked at. And what are those pertinent metrics? We can't manage everything. FISMA is an unfunded mandate, by the way, so I had to throw that in there. I feel better now. I feel better now. So this is part of our catharsis that we have unfunded mandate. We've got all these things. So as our CIOs have all this responsibility and all this weight on their shoulders, compliance is a beautiful place to hide. And you sit there and say, this is great, I have all of this stuff. But that does not mean you're better secure, more secure. I mean, that's the problem. So we're working with, and I'll talk about that in a minute, we're working with all the agencies, including the 3 letters, in looking at some of these threats to the United States and how can we really get to more specific monitoring metrics on a continuous basis, thereby improving security, vice just having more compliance. So anyway, the idea is through efficiency, agility, and innovation, these are specific things which you can see in here, which include improving asset utilization under efficiency, aggregated demand and aggregated system consolidation, which is the federal data centers. So under federal data centers, we're looking at consolidating from all the data centers. By the way, we published a report. Also, the main report is on the website, CIO.gov again. Our group has done a detailed study. There's some more stuff behind it, of course, we have not put out in the public because there's a little more sensitivity to that. But we know all the data centers, by the way, and you won't believe it, after going through 3 or 4 iterations, more data centers popped up. I'm not sure what goes on behind the scenes, but apparently these data centers are getting together or something's happening. But we have more data centers. But the good news is, based on tiered definition, we've come up with them, we know where they are, we've come up with all the definitions as to where the data centers are. And now, by agency and by multi-tenancy, we can look at all this different data, and we're able to look at the total number, which we have published on the site. And we're going to reduce that by 40% over 5 years is the goal for the US government. And again, the federal CIO has been the forefront of all of this, and now all the agencies have been given this target. Every agency is making a commitment to make this thing happen. Now that is at the agency and department level. What about horizontal multi-tenancy options? Great question. What about private cloud? Great question. These are the precedents to make this thing happen. I'll just mention a couple more things. Obviously, if you want a grain productivity and so on and so forth, agility, you want to be purchasing services as is, because cloud is a pay-as-you-go, use-as-you-go model as to traditionally what we have been doing in acquisition in government. And of course, you want near instantaneous surge and capability. So for example, on data.gov and other things, we've been using cloud from day one last year in May 2009, and we could surge to 20 million hits, anything, no problem, and we were handling all of that. In fact, we even handled another agency's infrastructure that went down, and we seamlessly did that. I will not mention the agency, but we were able to do that, and you can do those kind of things. You can do disaster recovery and active, and all kinds of good configurations because things are in the cloud. However, data.gov is a pure unclassified, open the information and make it available kind of system. So it's low in terms of physical controls, and we were able to do that. There are many other examples, Recovery Act, the USA Gov, and many, many other agencies, NASA, Nebula, there's DOD with DISA and the race environment. So the idea is now what's happening is that the mission owners are saying, hey, wait a second, I can get this thing done really fast. I'm going to hold the CIO more accountable. I can only pay for what I need as opposed to waiting for the typical 7 to 9 months to make things happen. And I can get my application out and it works pretty well. So great, I think this cloud thing is pretty good. So I think that's what's really happening. It's becoming more organic as to how we're making this thing happen. And lastly, it's about innovation. I mean, we want to tap into public and private sector innovation. At the end of the day, as it's the law of entropy. Nature finds a way. When there's a vacuum, things happen, and you fill that vacuum. And so what's happening now is people are hedging their bets a little bit, but they're looking at this cloud thing and saying, you know what, there's certain things certain use cases I can put into the cloud. Now, you would not put your HR information into the cloud. You'd have to heavily protect it, encrypt it, and so on and so forth. But I'm talking about certain other things that you can now put to the cloud and use that, and that's what's really happening. So the economics are really motivating this transformation, believe it or not. At the end of the day, all the other stuff I was at a CIO council earlier today, and I came to the United States in '78, and the very first thing I came in, someone gave me this expression, and pardon me if I use that, but it says, money talks and bullshit walks. I never understood that philosophy, but 20 years later, I did get it, what it really meant. And so money talks. Money is what's talking here. The economics are really driving this motivation, And what's happening is that people are saying, hey, wait a second, I can also save it. Now, cheaper is not cloud does not necessarily offer cheaper. Cloud is to pay as you go, so you can't do an apples to oranges comparison here. However, you can do certain things faster. There's no doubt about it. We have proven that on and on again. We were able to deploy some capabilities in 3 months, which normally would have taken 9 months. We've been able to deploy certain services very, very quick and instantaneously and have people share that service much faster with cloud than before. And it's greener in some sense based on the use as opposed to having all this stuff sitting over there. So sustainability is another angle that in GSA we are very concerned about, obviously, and this is one of our roles. So we say it's faster, better, greener, or cheaper, and take 1 out of 4 is pretty good. If you do 2 out of 4, you're outstanding. And if you're 4 out of 4, like I said earlier today, you should start your own company or something. The idea here is that with these new budget submissions, as listed in the OMB report on IT, that agencies will be required to complete alternative analysis and include cloud computing as an alternative as part of their submission. So now we're actually now getting it into every agency has to look at this. This in addition to the cloud, to IT reform, which says you must move to the cloud. So now we're talking about something serious. And alternative analysis for all new planned and performing major IT investments by September 2011, and by 2012, alternative analysis for all IT investment, making enhancements to an existing investment require this cloud alternative analysis. So now we're following that with some budget and policy. So we have established a program management office, and this is a small office, it's not a big office, it's at GSA currently, but the idea is GSA is not the center of the universe on this, we're not. We're saying that at this PMO, and if you go to info.apps.gov, this is our cloud computing central site for all things cloud, and more stuff is going to happen as we keep on improving the site. But we have not only got all the information regarding those 3 types of service delivery models for infrastructure as a service, we're just going to talk about that in a minute, software as a service, and like email, and then platform as a service like geospatial. So all of these things, you'll start seeing more and more information on that. You'll also see some ancillary projects like FedRAMP, which is cloud security. These are foundational elements that people are looking at before we go to the cloud, because the top concerns of going to the cloud is what? Security, privacy, and records, right? Those are things that people want to know. They want to know their information, is it retrievable, where is it, what's going on, and so that's the kind of thing that we're very concerned about. So the idea is to promote adoption, remove obstacles in government-wide acquisition and utilization of cost-effective green and sustainable initiatives. And what we're doing is we're going to do government-wide blanket purchase agreements, BPAs. We've done the first, which is a 75 million ceiling kind of thing, which is infrastructure service. The question naturally that we're being asked is, hey, wait a second, why can't you do more billions? Well, you got to start somewhere, right? Because trying to get and change the entire government in 1 year is not something we do. We work it slowly. And now we're going to check the adoption of that and see how that's going. But meanwhile, agencies can still go to other infrastructure as a service providers. But of course, our things that we're going to put up on info.apps.gov on our services and the prices that we have negotiated for the government are incredible. So these 12 awardees, and I'll just talk about that in a minute, are going through a certification and accreditation, or ANA now, assessment and authorization. And once they get that, we are set to go and how you can award it and do web hosting, virtualization, and storage right on the site, make your deal, get the rate, and then provision it, and that's the objective of our approach. So the portal is what I'm talking about here. This is what the portal looks like, just in case you were thinking it was just a PowerPoint slide. Actually, it's live and works. And the idea is people are using it right now for information, and it's going to be the storefront for commoditized cloud services. So you can not only compare products, and some agencies are looking at this to compare products and services. And currently, we're only offering some SaaS and social media, but we're going to be having all the cloud services right on the site. And so this is where we're going to link to everything cloud. And so, for example, NIST has a portal as well in terms of standards and everything else. We will be linking to that site as well. So everything in government and cloud, you'll be able to see between all these sites, what's going on in architecture, in standards, in taxonomy, in definition, how do you select, manage, provision. And we're all working together on this model as well. So one of the things that we're working in government right now is a business and operations model. And we're thinking about, perhaps we should also have an industry day to solicit ideas and have an open, transparent gathering of how this business operations model happens. Because I know what you're thinking. I'm getting an ESP transmission from all of you. It's all coming right here. Like, hey, yeah, Sonny, it's all nice, but I got business right now, and so what is this stuff over here, Right? I got that transmission? Okay, I got it right here, this table. It's pretty good. I need to do a Karnak routine on that. So the issue is this. Yes, I do realize that. There is some trepidation, if you would, that we got all this stuff over here, and then what is this model over here? To be candid, we're working through it. This is all a new model here, right? We have got a lot of capability in government and a lot of vendors who also have great capability. So the idea is, how do you set up a business and operations model which is agile, web-based, and people can provision, and inclusive? We want to have as many people come in there and let the marketplace decide and go make it happen. So that's what we're trying to do, and we're going to be having an industry day, if you would, that we're trying to set up. And we're going to try to set up a participation model, like maybe IdeaScale or something like that, where y'all can communicate with us and give us ideas as to how we can make this thing happen. In addition to that, we're working on policy. There'll be some change in policy that will allow us to do some of the security and other things in allowing us to get to cloud adoption. And obviously the main thing are the main controls for the security for the cloud that is under FedRAMP. So these are sort of things that we're working on, but the business operations model, clearly, you'll see a lot of acquisitions start going out. And we're going to try to first reference and capture what all the government's doing, but even within the government, we're trying to get our act together as to how we can get everyone to work together. These are some of the awardees on the GSA infrastructure as a service. So you may be wondering, hey, wait a second, yeah, these are all good, but what about some others? So these are what has been in the BPA, and we're awarded that. They're going through these, the ANA process or CNA process right now. And the moment that happens, those services will be on info.apps.gov, and you'll be able to go directly to the site and order your web hosting or your virtualization or storage right there on the site and find prices and so on and so forth, and all the prices would be made available. So that is the idea of what we're going forward. There's a schedule to this, and I'll just talk about that in a minute. So this FedRAMP thing that I've been talking about is a really exciting opportunity here. So the idea is we've got something like 10,000 systems in the federal government for those at $80 billion. Each of the systems has many, many security boundaries and all kinds of things. If you were to break that down into subsystems, it's quite a lot. Each one of them sometimes is duplicating similar kinds of capabilities. So how many are HR, say Salesforce? I mean, whatever the case may be, there are many, many examples of this. Then you can look at it from low, moderate, or high in terms of what are some of the security controls and risks that you have for those systems. So guess what we're doing? We're copying that over, so every agency spends at least $180K for some of these CNAs, right? And does it for all these systems, and they're all doing it in these stovepipes for 24 CFO Act agencies, 250 sub-agencies, and all the things in government for up to 10,000 systems. I don't know the math, but that's a lot. And if you do those zeros, that's quite a few zeros in there, right? So wouldn't it be nice, this was a brilliant thing that the entire government came up with, that, hey, wait a second, what if we said for one particular thing, if it was a low and it was this kind of application and someone had it, and here was a CNA with 114 controls and all that, and you put that in there and you did it, and then you put it into a website secure, and then any other agency didn't have to go through the same ANA, and if they accepted what you did for the same kind of thing, then you don't have to do that over again. What about that? That'll save you $150,000, and they're like, whoa, that was brilliant. And so that's FedRAMP. That's essentially what FedRAMP is. The idea is but it'll only be successful. It's not mandatory, so we did not make it mandatory policy because I don't have the authority to do that. But we are working as a government for the first time. It's just tremendous energy, and NIST is involved, DOD is involved, DHS is involved, DOJ is involved, GSA is involved, NSA is involved. I mean, everyone's involved. And what they're doing is we're coming up with, okay, so we've agreed to what's the low baseline and what's the moderate baseline. And that's pretty damn good in government for 7 months. And so don't quote me on that. But that's what we're doing. And so with that, we are now able to look at, if that is the case, what are the continuous monitoring? We're getting very close with that. And then what are the actual threats that we need to focus on? And so if we have all of that, that's a pretty good start. That's a pretty good start. And then if we all put that in there, and if authorized contractors can also go in there and leverage it, they can deploy and use that and not spend the time on just paper exercises on compliance. They could spend that money getting more value solutions to the customer. That's what we're interested in. So that is the value of FedRAMP. We got over 1,000 comments that came in from all government and industry. And all the industries gave us separate comments. They said they didn't want to share with each other because competitive advantage. So we got that. We kept them all separate. We looked at all the trends and everything that's come in. It's very interesting what has come in. So we're going through those comments right now and doing a disposition of that and making sure that we adjust our FedRAMP controls and approach with all these different inputs that we've received from all of government, all industry, and some of the three letters in terms of what's going on. So we are modifying our approach a little bit, and we're looking at somewhere in the summer plus time frame to actually launch this as a capability. So this will be the big cloud security that's been holding people back a little bit before they venture into the cloud. And I will say to you that even on the unclassified, pure unclassified, low impact systems that are in the cloud already, we are watching it very, very carefully as to what the threats are from external and internal. And it's very, very interesting. It's given us a good foundation to build upon. And we're seeing all kinds of goodies come in, you know, the malware goodies, cross-site scripting goodies. I won't tell all the goodies because I don't want to give all the countermeasures away. But I will say that we're watching all this stuff very carefully and learning from it. So this will be a more informed government as we work together with our industry partners. The next thing is software as a service. So in that, we have used an interagency email working group. And in that interagency working group, which was established in June last year, we have done an RFI process, which is request for information, and published that, gone through all the comments and people gave us, and come up with an RFQ, request for quotation, for government-wide blanket purchase agreement of software as a service. The idea would be that all the players who have email in the service and want to offer that in the government and government-wide capability, you can do that up to moderate level, and away you go. And once you do that, the task order, and that is in the process of going to be released sometime. I can't give you the exact details. We're still working through acquisition on that. But we have completed the RFI. There were 13 respondents, and we've created this one RFQ. And the procurement will be conducted very soon. And then in 2011, we're going to award this, this procurement. We also internally in GSA have been practicing what we preach. So our CIO, Casey Coleman, has been a leader in making sure that, for example, we had a competition, or she had a competition actually, and ran that competition, and Google was awarded this contract for GSA. So we're migrating our stuff to Google. And so GSA completed the security authorization of Google Apps, which can be leveraged by other agencies, and in fact, USAID just recently leveraged those apps to greatly reduce the timeline, and it was significant. We're talking few months rather than long amount of months. So I think that is a really key area where this is an example of an agency that came in and said, hey, that's a pretty good idea. I'd like to use that, right? As opposed to, no, I don't trust what the heck you're doing. I'm going to roll my own and do my own you know, A&A process. And that's the problem, because we have to start trusting each other. So I think in conclusion, this is a record. I think I've done that in time, I think. The challenges that we have in cloud is we are looking at various definitions of where we are. I'm just going to go to the main. Here we are. We have, with NIST, defined what clouds are, what types of clouds. We've defined the characteristics on the bottom right. Great job, NIST. And then they've got portals and got a lot more exchange with industry on architecture, taxonomy, and so on and so forth. We've defined the 3 kinds of services: infrastructure, platform, and software. And for each one of these areas, we're putting tools, we're doing acquisitions to make sure it's real. I'll give you one other example. We're moving like the geo stuff to try some of those geo as a platform into the cloud, like a geo cloud, if you would, to start the journey. Geospatial applications. So that's a good journey. We recently awarded a task order for dataset hosting in the cloud in data.gov. So now people can do visualizations, mashups, all kinds of things in the cloud, and that's a big deal, by the way. It's a game changer. You'll be hearing about that a little bit more in the press and some of our interviews soon. And obviously infrastructure as service, doing the security of that. Software as a service, coming out with the government-wide BPA. We've come up with a cloud framework for migration. A cloud computing strategy has been released on CIO.gov. Also, the IT reforms have made cloud first as a policy. And finally, I think we need to discuss with you, industry and government, what are some examples so we can share and learn from each other. At the end of the day, this is only will not happen from a top-down mandate. This will happen if all of us believe that, hey, we can get this thing done. And we want to improve, so give us comments through the NIST and the GSA portal. Give us comments as to how we can improve. And certainly, I can meet with some of you afterwards as well, ask if any questions. But we are really excited about this. It's a new journey, and as I say, the forecast is cloudy, and that's a good thing. Thanks. Good? Okay.
Question?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, one of the questions I have there is basically talking about hybrid cloud. Can you guys hear me
Yes.
now? Okay. One of the things is what we are going through in our agency was pretty much the data need to be on premises.
I'm sorry, could you say that again, please?
The data need to be on premises, okay, the data.
Yes,
okay?
yes.
So the apps can be on the platform as a service or somewhere, okay? Or is there any vision in the GSA or any of these agencies having like the way Amazon puts to the secure tunneling, okay, through VPN to the on-premises data centers. Do you have any thought process to build a hybrid clouds? Because that may be the starting point to our agencies if we think, because we don't want to move data into somewhere else at this moment. So we want to have a migration path where we wanted to keep data at least on premises in our own data centers, but push the apps onto the cloud, okay?
Right.
So then have a secure VPN tunnels hitting, going back across.
Gotcha.
So, okay.
Yeah, so I think the question is, you know, the apps, if you put the apps to the cloud, the data in some agencies, there's a concern to keep that on premise. And if the data goes everywhere else, how do we know where the data is? And so what is that strategy? So that's a very good question. And the thing is that as you move the apps to the cloud, there's a lot of data that's at rest and is in motion, correct? And data classification is a challenge within government, by the way. So the president has recently released a CUI memo that's also on whitehouse.gov and CIO.gov, and it's called Controlled Unclassified Information, called CUI. So anything that's classified, of course, we're talking that's a different animal. Those are different security enclaves, and they have heavy encryption and all kinds of stuff, so that's not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about is a sensitive and unclassified or unclassified enclave. And under that enclave, we're going to make sure that there are certain provisions, for example, for PII protection, right? So that data classification should protect that. So anything that's PII, you should have things like DLP tools, like data leakage protection, all kinds of tools to prevent egress or ingress of, you should know where it is, right? By the way, people who are concerned about that in the cloud, in most of the instances, they didn't even know that they had data leakage in their we're just whispering here, you know, and so that was a challenge. So unless you have those tools, you didn't even know what the heck you had. So yes, it's a challenge within the cloud as well. But for certain kinds of data, the Attorney General has come up with a new guideline, right? The previous guideline was protect everything and share what you must. And the new one is share everything and protect what you must in the unclassified enclave. So what that means is, as long as it does not violate national security, as long as it does not violate the privacy, and as long as it meets the Information Quality Act, you must release it. So now, what's adoption of that is a whole different animal, and the classification of that has to be still maintained. So, yes, so right. Yeah, so all that should be protected by your system to make sure that all of that is portion marked or there's a way that that cannot be leaked, and if that is staying on premise, the only way to do that is through data classification. The second part of your question is regarding premise. It's interesting, American industry has come to the government and said, now wait a second, if you are not allowing some of our stuff to be OCONUS, outside continental United States, we're having a tit-for-tat sort of retaliation by foreigners and saying, well, then in that case, we won't give government business to US companies as well. That's an interesting dilemma where security now and data sovereignty is what I'm talking about there is maintained. So we're saying that, for example, on data.gov and others, that data is wide open, unclassified, so we don't care if it shows up in China or other places. That is open. For sensitive data, you can keep it in a private cloud on your premise if you want to, or you can go to a hybrid system, and if you portion mark that data, for stuff that is non-sensitive, how does it matter if it goes somewhere else?
The real problem what we are facing is we are built in a sort of a hybrid cloud, okay, where we have a VPN tunnels which are going on.
Yeah.
But the problem is what we are seeing is a lot of performance issues, okay? So because the data is not on the proximity, so it is giving a performance.
Okay, I understand your question.
So that is the where we are trying
gotcha,
to ask. And Unisys launched a layer 2 device, encryption device. But that also we tried to put together, but that didn't work out. So that's just I want to understand how it's going.
Okay, so your question is on VPN tunnels, if the data is not co-located with where the app is. And so what's happening is that there's latency issues that are arising from having to go back and forth. These are architectures that, believe it or not, in the cloud are being worked out. Certain sessions can be encrypted. We have encryption provisions, if you would, for certain sensitive data. But if you're going to invoke encryption across the gamut for all unclassified data, you're going to pay a price for up to 20% impact in some instances. These are things that we have to engineer together to work. I don't have a pat answer for you. I'm just saying these are provisions that will have to be worked out. So maybe see me afterwards and we can talk a little bit more about it. Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Mine's actually really simple.
Oh, I love simple questions.
Thank you.
I know it's not simple. This is going to be profound. I better watch out.
No, I promise this is simple. I was talking to a 30-year-old, 30 years in the business as a GRO for a very, very large manufacturer. And he actually got an email the other day from a .mil, .supernet, but .gmail. And the one question I have is, when you guys do move to Gmail, why at least not tweak the Gmail aspect to get that first level of skepticism that it's really not, that's fraudulent? I mean, I understand moving to the cloud, and obviously I'm very involved in security, so that part's a given, but that whole spamming, phishing thing is jumping out at you when you guys are using generic Gmail versus GovMail or GovMail.
Right.
Or
So just to clarify, so you're talking about like spear phishing and other kinds of things which we're also tracking. So what we're talking about is the email would originate from a .gov domain. It may be using Microsoft, it may be using Google, it may be using others, but it is not going to come out with a gmail.com or something like that. It will only be a .gov using an infrastructure for any one of the 4 or 5 or 6 providers who win this application, right? Or win this BPA, if you would. With that provision, we've put in very secure requirements in this RFQ, which we've also worked with all the agencies as to what is good enough for low and moderate. For people who, for the gentleman, the other question, who still believe that no, moderate is not good enough for me, I want high, they can invoke a private cloud with double encryption. They can invoke as much security as they choose that they want to invoke, and that's more cost, and that's fine. It's because it comes to the data classification. So the answer to your question is everything will be .gov. We are using a lot of controls within .gov, within this email procurement that protects security, that protects privacy, that protects monitoring. It will have some FISMA monitoring controls and other kinds of things in there. It has data egress, ingress sort of things, and but the idea is that we want to get something out. Otherwise, we can be arguing these fine points forever, And believe it or not, there are 2 camps to everything, at least.
So this was actually somebody using Gmail who should not have been.
Yes. Yeah, that was a violation, so, yes. But I'm not saying anything. Yes, yeah, no, but that's a good question. Out of time, I think I've been given some good questions. One more, or? I'm looking to her, she's the boss. Yes?
A lot of the focus of what you talked about today, or what we've talked about, it focuses around the technology and what's happening in the vendor community. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what I'll call the rather unique other barriers in the government. What I'm getting at is things like some of the idiosyncrasies in the way we fund things in government often don't lend themselves to the most desired outcome. I'll give an example. We have a lot of web services within our agency, and don't want to say what it is.
I was giving a piercing vision there, trying to find out what it was.
They're not incented to move to a cloud web-based solution because the way that we do our funding mechanism and our fee mechanism, we don't charge them anything for it right now. And we have working capital fund issues where we burden fees on those. But we're talking about revolutionary change almost in a system that has built paradigms, a technology that has built paradigms over 15 or 20 years that we've layered on our funding mechanisms and our acquisition systems. And I think that those need to change as well. And we're talking about change in a rapid amount of time. I mean, cloud first, move through 3 systems within the next 18 months, 1 within 12 months. What are some of the other things? I know in the 25-point plan, they're talking about developing other flexible funding mechanisms.
That's exactly right.
What are some of the other challenges that you see there, particularly being at an executive level, just trying to do things within your own agency?
Well, I think you said it. Bottom line is under the 25-point plan, again on CIO.gov, there's a thing on flexible budgeting, and the budgeting is the final frontier. I thought space was the final frontier, but apparently budgeting is. Is that really, that is a challenge. And in fact, they have colors of money as well. And so these are, programs are pretty loath to release that unless they see a value. So the value creation and the value add is how they will come. If they don't see value in that, And it's a pay-as-you-go, so we're looking at models how to do that. Now, we have not got the budgeting solved. I mean, that is an IT reform area. I think the second is cultural. To me, cultural is a big challenge. The people are saying, wait a second, I'm the expert here, and my infrastructure is better than your infrastructure, and it's better than this infrastructure. But then we have to look at all the cost modeling and everything else. But when you're getting 10% or more budget cuts, and if there's all the budget, everyone's reading that, these are significant. We need to get on board, or we'll be kind of overtaken by events. So I think that's what's driving this. So yes, cultural, yes, budgeting, but the use cases is what's driving it, and ease of use. If there's a way to get to something and use it well, then I think we'd have succeeded. We have not succeeded yet, but I think we're on the right path by offering those sort of things. And again, these kind of comments are welcome to help us get better. And please.
I just want to add that one of the things that you touched on, unfunded mandates.
Yes. Yeah, chargeback is one area, and I think, for example, in the government, out of the $80 billion, it's rumored that 10% of that is IT security, and it was rumored, because no one knows exactly what the amount is. But the challenge is that with that, we have to figure out ways to do chargeback mechanism and pay as you go, and these are things that we're trying. It'll take some time. I'm sure I'll be here next year or something, and we'll still be talking about this for many years to come. But the idea is to start a journey somewhere, and you just have to start with some few steps. And I think we are finally getting some momentum around this. So. Thank you so much.